Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Marco, just an Italian-American guy who can't get enough of Europe's dark side. You know, the stories that don't make it into the travel guides. The ones locals still whisper about over wine in old taverns. Tonight's story comes from Austria. A beautiful country, right? Snow-capped Alps, Mozart, those gorgeous Christmas markets. But like everywhere in Europe, beneath that postcard-perfect surface lies something older. Something that remembers. This is a true story shared with me by a woman I'll call Sophia. She's from northern Italy, near the Austrian border. And what happened to her family during a trip to Salzburg still haunts her to this day. It's the kind of encounter that makes you realize those old superstitions your grandmother talked about. They exist for a reason. Before we dive in, let me give you some context. In Central European folklore, there's a deep belief that certain places hold onto tragedy. Hotels, especially old ones converted from manor houses or castles, are particularly susceptible. They've seen centuries of lives pass through their doors. Births, deaths, betrayals, murders. The walls absorb it all. And when children die in these places, that's when things get truly unsettling. Because in European tradition, a child's spirit doesn't understand death the same way an adult might. They linger, confused, sometimes resentful, always looking for something they lost. So let's turn down the lights and get comfortable. This one's going to stay with you. The journey to Salzburg Sophia came from a working-class family in Verona. Her father had worked in a factory his entire life. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. Money was always tight. Vacations weren't really a thing when Sophia was growing up. Maybe a day trip to Lake Garda if they were lucky, but never anything extravagant. But Sophia had done well for herself. She'd studied hard, got into university, became a translator. She married a good man, Luca, who worked as an architect. Together, they'd built a comfortable life. Not wealthy, but stable enough to afford small luxuries their parents never could. When their daughter Emma turned 7, they decided to take a family trip. Something Sophia's mother, Nonna Giulia, could join them on. The old woman had never left Italy in her 73 years. She'd spent her whole life caring for others, first her own parents, then her husband when he got sick, then her grandchildren when Sophia needed help. Sophia wanted to give her mother something beautiful. A memory. Time was running out. She could see it in how Nonna Giulia moved now, slower, more carefully. How she forgot little things sometimes. They chose Salzburg because it was close, just across the border. Famous for its Baroque architecture, its musical heritage, its alpine charm. Luca found a hotel online that looked perfect. It was housed in a renovated 18th century building in the old town, right near the Salzach River. The photos showed elegant rooms with high ceilings, antique furniture, and views of the fortress on the hill. For 3 nights, they'd splurge. After that, they'd move to a cheaper pension for the rest of the week. But those first few nights, they'd live like the aristocrats who once owned these grand buildings. When they arrived in late October, Salzburg was draped in autumn fog, the kind of thick, damp mist that clings to everything and makes the old city feel like it exists outside of time. The hotel looked even more impressive in person. A pale yellow facade with white trim, tall windows with wooden shutters, an arched entrance that opened into a marble foyer. The receptionist, an older Austrian woman with perfect English and a formal manner, checked them in efficiently. She handed over an old-fashioned brass key, the heavy kind that feels substantial in your hand. "Room 214, she said. "Second floor. The lift is there, or you can take the stairs if you prefer." They took the stairs. Nonna Giulia insisted. "I'm not so old I can't climb a few steps," she said in Italian, waving away Luca's offered arm. The hallway on the second floor was long and dimly lit. Wall sconces cast amber light on burgundy wallpaper and dark wood paneling. Their footsteps were muffled by a thick carpet runner. Everything smelled of furniture polish and something else. Something faintly musty, like old fabric that had been stored too long. When Luca unlocked the door to 214, they stepped into a spacious room with 2 double beds, a sitting area with velvet chairs, and tall windows overlooking a narrow cobblestone street. The furniture was genuinely antique. A carved wardrobe that must have weighed a ton, a writing desk with scrollwork legs, a full-length mirror in a gilded frame. Beautiful, Sophia breathed, setting down her suitcase. Emma immediately ran to the window to look out at the street below. Nonna Giulia lowered herself carefully onto one of the beds, testing the mattress. That's when Sophia noticed it, a smell. Subtle at first, but growing stronger as she moved deeper into the room. Damp. Not the clean dampness of rain, but something heavier, more organic. Like wet wool that had been left in a pile, or standing water in a closed space. Luca, do you smell that? Her husband was unpacking, hanging shirts in the wardrobe. He paused, sniffing the air. What smell? You don't smell it. It's like mildew, or something damp. Emma wrinkled her nose. Smells funny, Mama. But Luca just shrugged. Old building. Probably just the humidity. We can open a window. They did open a window, letting in the cold October air. But the smell didn't dissipate. If anything, it seemed to settle lower, pooling near the floor. Nonna Giulia said nothing, but Sophia noticed her mother's expression. The old woman was staring at the space beneath the beds with an intensity that seemed odd for such a casual observation. The first night they spent that first day exploring Salzburg, the fortress, the cathedral, the birthplace of Mozart. Emma delighted in everything, her little hand in Sophia's as they wandered through squares where markets sold roasted chestnuts and mulled wine. Even Nonna Giulia seemed energized, though Sophia made sure they stopped frequently to rest. By evening, they were exhausted. They ate dinner at a traditional guest house, heavy Austrian fare that left them pleasantly full and sleepy. Walking back to the hotel through the foggy streets, Sophia felt content. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. Quality time with her family, creating memories. Back in room 214, the smell hit them again immediately. It seemed stronger now, in the evening. That damp, organic odor that made Sophia think of cellars and standing water. I'm calling the desk, she said, picking up the phone. The same formal receptionist answered. Sophia explained about the smell as diplomatically as she could. The woman apologized profusely in her clipped, precise way. I am very sorry for the inconvenience, Fra Moretti. Unfortunately, we are fully booked this weekend. There is a conference in the city, but I can send housekeeping with air fresheners if that would help. What else could Sophia say? They couldn't exactly pack up and find another hotel at this hour, especially with Nonna Giulia tired and Emma already in her pajamas. That's fine, thank you. The air fresheners helped a little, but as night fell and they prepared for bed, the smell seemed to grow stronger. It concentrated near the floor, particularly around the beds. They'd arranged the sleeping arrangements simply. Sophia and Luca would share one bed, Emma and Nonna Giulia the other. Emma had been excited to sleep with her grandmother, and the old woman had smiled, agreeing readily. But as Sophia helped Emma brush her teeth in the ensuite bathroom, she heard voices in the bedroom, her mother and Luca, speaking in low tones. When she emerged with Emma, both of them looked up quickly, conversation cutting off. Everything okay? Fine, fine, Luca said. But something in his expression made Sophia pause. Nonna Giulia was already under the covers, lying very still, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. They turned off the lights. The room fell into darkness, broken only by the amber glow from the street lamps outside, filtered through the gauzy curtains. Sophia lay next to Luca, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the old building. Pipes creaking. The muffled sound of footsteps from the room above. The distant hum of traffic. She was drifting off when Emma's voice cut through the darkness. "Mama, my bunny fell." Sophia's eyes opened. "What, sweetie?" "My bunny. She fell under the bed." Sophia sighed, sitting up. Emma's stuffed rabbit. The one she'd had since she was a baby. The one she couldn't sleep without. Of course it had fallen. "I'll get it," she whispered, not wanting to wake Luca or her mother. "I can look." Nonna, Giulia's voice came from the other bed, surprisingly alert. "No, Mama, I'll do it. You rest." But the old woman was already moving, her silhouette shifting in the darkness. She switched on the bedside lamp, a soft yellow glow illuminating her side of the room. "Stay there, Emma," Nonna Giulia said firmly. "I'll find your coniglio." She lowered herself slowly to her knees beside the bed, one hand on the mattress for support. Sophia watched from across the room, ready to help if her mother needed it. Nonna Giulia lifted the edge of the bedspread, peering into the darkness beneath the bed. And then she froze. Sophia knew her mother's face better than anyone. Every expression, every mood. And what she saw now made her blood run cold. Nonna Giulia's eyes had gone wide, her mouth slightly open. Not in shock, but in something worse. Recognition. Horror. The smell intensified suddenly, rolling out from under the bed like a wave. That damp, rotten odor, so strong now that Sophia gagged. "Mama." Nonna Giulia dropped the bedspread back into place. When she turned to look at Sophia, her face had gone completely pale. "Nothing there," she said, her voice tight. "The rabbit must have rolled somewhere else." "But I saw it fall right there," Emma protested. "I said it's not there." The snap in Nonna Giulia's voice made everyone freeze. The old woman never raised her voice. Never. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking. "Emma, you come sleep in the other bed with your parents. I'll sleep here by myself." "But Nonna." "Now, Emma." The little girl scrambled out of bed, confused and a little frightened by her grandmother's tone. Sophia moved over, making room for her daughter between herself and Luca, who had woken up during the commotion. "Giulia, what's wrong?" he asked quietly. "Nothing. I'm tired. I need to sleep alone. That's all." It was a lie. Sophia knew it was a lie. Something had happened when Nonna Giulia looked under that bed. Something the old woman wasn't telling them. The sickness, they left Salzburg the next morning as planned, moving on to the cheaper pension in a nearby village. Nonna Giulia insisted she was fine, but Sophia could see she wasn't. The old woman barely touched her breakfast. She was pale, moving slowly, her usual sharp eyes now dull and distant. By that evening, Nonna Giulia was running a fever. By the following morning, she couldn't keep food down. They found a local doctor who examined her, prescribed antibiotics for what he thought might be a stomach infection, and suggested they cut the trip short if she didn't improve. She didn't improve. 3 days later, they were back in Italy. Nonna Giulia so weak that Luca had to carry her from the car into Sophia's apartment. They called their family doctor, who ordered blood tests, checked for everything from food poisoning to flu. Nothing explained it. For 2 weeks, Nonna Giulia lay in bed, feverish and exhausted. She'd always been a strong woman, resilient despite her age. But this sickness had drained her in a way Sophia had never seen. It was as if something had reached inside her mother and pulled out her life force. Sophia sat by her bedside every day, reading to her, trying to get her to eat. And every time, she wanted to ask about that night in the hotel. "What did you see under the bed, Mama?" What happened? But she was afraid of the answer. It wasn't until the third week, when Nonna Giulia finally started to improve, that the truth came out. Sophia was alone with her mother, bringing her tea and biscotti. The old woman was sitting up in bed, color finally returning to her cheeks. She'd just come back from seeing someone Sophia's father would have called a charlatan. A local woman known for spiritual cleansings, for dealing with things that doctors couldn't fix. Sophia didn't believe in such things. Not really. But she'd been desperate, and Nonna Giulia had agreed to the visit. Whatever the woman had done, burning herbs and murmuring prayers in dialect, it seemed to have worked. "Sophia," Nonna Giulia said quietly, taking her daughter's hand, "I need to tell you what I saw." "The truth, when I looked under that bed," Nonna Giulia began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I saw a child." Sophia felt her stomach drop. "What?" "A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was lying there, curled on her side, wearing a white nightdress. Her hair was wet, plastered to her face, and her skin—" The old woman closed her eyes. Her skin was so pale it was almost blue, like she'd been in water too long. Sophia couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. At first, I thought I was seeing things, my old eyes playing tricks. But then she moved, her head tilted up, and she looked right at me. Her eyes were open, but they were wrong. Empty, and she was holding Emma's rabbit. "Dio mio." She smiled at me, Sophia, this terrible, wrong smile. And then she started crawling forward, coming out from under the bed. Nonna Giulia's hand was shaking in Sophia's grip. I dropped the covers. I couldn't let her come out. I couldn't let her near Emma. So I lied. I sent Emma away, and I slept in that bed myself, knowing that thing was underneath me. Sophia felt tears streaming down her face. "Mama, why didn't you say something?" "What would I have said? That I saw a ghost? You would have thought I was losing my mind, and we'd already paid for the room. I thought I could protect you all. I thought it would be just one night, and then we'd leave. But you got sick." Nonna Giulia nodded slowly. "The woman who came today, she told me what happened. When you encounter a spirit like that, especially a child spirit, it attaches to you. It feeds on your energy, your life force. She said I'm lucky I survived. If I'd been younger, stronger, it might have taken more. Might have followed us home." "The rabbit," Sophia whispered. "Emma never found it, did she?" "No. That thing kept it." They sat in silence for a long moment, Sophia's mind reeling. She thought about that hotel room, about the smell, about the way the receptionist had apologized so formally when Sophia complained. How many other guests had noticed something wrong? How many had been too polite, too rational to say anything? "Do you know who she was?" Sophia finally asked. "The girl?" Nonna Giulia shook her head. The woman said it was probably someone who died in that building long ago. Maybe drowned in the river and her body was brought there. Maybe died in a bathtub in that very room when it was still a private residence. These old buildings, Sophia, they hold on to their dead. Understanding the encounter, so what do we make of this story? Let me share some cultural context that might help us understand what Sophia's family experienced. In Central European folklore, particularly in Austrian and Bavarian traditions, there's a strong belief in Wassergeister, water spirits. These aren't always malevolent, but when a child drowns, the spirit is said to become confused and resentful. Unable to move on, it lingers in liminal spaces, places between the living world and the next. Old hotels, especially those converted from noble residences or manor houses, are particularly prone to such hauntings. Think about it. These buildings have stood for centuries. Before modern plumbing, before child safety standards, before medicine could save sick children, how many people died within those walls? How many tragedies were covered up to protect family reputations? The smell Sophia and her family noticed is significant. In European ghost lore, particularly German and Austrian traditions, the presence of a water spirit is often preceded by a smell of dampness or decay. It's not just mildew. It's the odor of the grave, of things that have been submerged too long. Historical records show that in the 18th and 19th centuries, when that building was first constructed, child mortality was horrifically high. Drowning was one of the most common causes of accidental death for children. Whether in rivers, wells, or even bathtubs, water claimed countless young lives. What makes child spirits particularly dangerous in European folklore is their confusion. An adult spirit might understand what's happened to them, might have some awareness. But a child? They're lost, scared, looking for parents who are long dead. And sometimes that fear turns to anger, to resentment of the living children they encounter. The fact that the spirit took Emma's rabbit is especially telling. In Germanic folklore, there's a tradition of spirits taking objects from children, a phenomenon sometimes linked to the changeling myths. The idea is that the spirit is trying to establish a connection, to anchor itself to a living child. And Nonna Giulia's sacrifice? That's pure Italian tradition right there. The elder protecting the young at any cost. In Southern European culture, grandmothers are often seen as the spiritual guardians of the family. They carry knowledge of the old ways, of how to deal with the unseen world. The fact that she needed a spiritual cleansing afterward isn't surprising either. In Italian folk magic, which has roots going back to pre-Christian times, it's believed that close encounters with malevolent spirits leave a mark. The spirit literally attaches itself to your energy, feeding on your life force until it's removed through ritual. Think about how Nonna Giulia's symptoms manifested: weakness, fever, inability to eat. These are classic signs of what's called spiritual sickness in folk tradition. The body doesn't show illness in ways modern medicine can detect, but the person is clearly dying. Hotels across Europe have similar stories. The Langham in London has its room 3333, where guests report seeing a Victorian gentleman. The Russell Hotel in Dublin has the spirit of a little girl who plays in the hallways. Musham Castle in Austria, not far from where this story took place, is known as the Witch's Castle for its dark history of torture and execution. What happened to Sophia's family isn't unique. It's part of a long tradition of encounters in these old spaces where the boundaries between past and present grow thin. The mystery remains. To this day, Sophia hasn't returned to Salzburg. She tried to research the hotel to find out if anyone had died there, but records from that far back are incomplete. The building changed hands multiple times over the centuries. Whatever tragedies it witnessed, they're lost to history now. Emma doesn't remember much about the trip. She was young enough that it's become a vague memory, though she does remember losing her favorite rabbit and being sad about it. Sophia never told her daughter what really happened. Maybe someday, when Emma's older, she will. But for now, some things are better left unspoken. Nonna Giulia recovered fully, though the experience left its mark. She's more cautious now about old buildings, about spaces that feel wrong in ways she can't quite articulate. And she carries protective amulets, small things given to her by the woman who performed the cleansing, just in case. The most disturbing part of the story, at least for me, is thinking about that little girl. Who was she? When did she die? Does she still lie beneath that bed in room 214? Holding a stuffed rabbit that doesn't belong to her, waiting for the next child to drop a toy? The hotel is still operating. You can book a room there right now if you want. They probably renovated since Sophia's visit, updated the decor, maybe even replaced the beds. But if the stories are true, if spirits really do anchor themselves to places where they died, then no amount of renovation will change what's underneath. So I'll leave you with this thought. Next time you're traveling through Europe, checking into one of those beautiful historic hotels with their antique furniture and their centuries of history, take a moment. Pay attention to the smells, to the feelings you can't quite explain, and maybe, just maybe, check under the bed before you go to sleep. Because in Europe, the past is never really past. It's always there, just beneath the surface, waiting. Thanks for listening to another dark tale from across the Atlantic. If you've had any strange experiences in European hotels or other old buildings, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical. But maybe keep a light on.